पूर्वप्रायमरत्यानिवतु देव्युत्वतः ज्योतिषावाधते तमः। निरुस्वसारमस्कृतोषसमदेव्यायते अपेदुहासते तमः। सा नूयत्ययस्या वयमनिते यामन्नभिक्ष्णहि वृक्षेण वसति मे वयः उपमापेति शक्तमः कृष्णमव्याप्तमस्थितम्
There he could stay the self, the silence one. His soul had peace. It knew the cosmic whole. Then suddenly a luminous finger fell on all things seen or touched or heard or felt, and showed his mind that nothing could be known, that must be reached, from which all knowledge comes. The skeptic ray disrupted all that seemed, and smote at the very roots of thought and sense.
Good morning. We're reading in Book 2, Canto 13, The Self of Mind. We've come to page 285, the fifth line from the top. So we're following King Aswapati's journey. He's gone through the kingdoms of the greater mind, through 3 different levels of that, seeing these co-creator godheads or beings of those realms which participate in the manifestation on the lower levels. And then we went into the heavens of the ideal, and he ascended a further stairway up in the consciousness towards the ideal. And on either side of this stairway that he ascended was, on one side, the kingdoms of the deathless rose, and on the other, the kingdoms of the deathless fire. And representing, it seemed, something of the psychic consciousness, 2 aspects of it, love and devotion and self-giving on one side, and this fire of aspiration on the other. And then he ascended still further into the self of mind, what you're reading now. And I'll just read a little bit from the beginning of the canto to give a summary of what this realm is like, because there's quite a significant change that happens here. He says, "At last there came a bare, indifferent sky, where silence listened to the cosmic voice, but answered nothing to a million calls. The soul's endless question met with no response. And abrupt conclusion ended eager hopes. A deep cessation in a mighty calm. A finish line on the last page of thought, and a margin, and a blank of wordless peace. There paused the climbing hierarchy of worlds. He stood on a wide arc of summit space, alone, with an enormous self of mind, which held all life in a corner of its vast. Omnipotent, immobile, and aloof. In the world which sprang from it, it took no part. It gave no heed to the paeans of victory. It was indifferent to its own defeats. It heard the cry of grief and made no sign. Impartial fell its gaze on evil and good. It saw destruction come and did not move. So this is the realm in which he's come, and then something happened on the next page, 284, about a little over halfway down. Then suddenly a luminous finger fell on all things seen or touched or heard or felt, and showed his mind that nothing could be known. That must be reached from which all knowledge comes. The skeptic ray disrupted all that seems and smote at the very roots of thought and sense. And a little further down, a doubt corroded even the means to think. Distrust was thrown upon mind's instruments. All that it takes for reality shining coin, proved fact, fixed inference, deduction clear, firm theory, assured significance, appeared as frauds upon time's credit bank, or assets valueless in truth's treasury. So that's where we left off. Maybe, before we continue, I'll read a little from Sri Aurobindo's first major experience, a little booklet that Bhavan put together, which describes Sri Aurobindo's own experience of this. So I'll just read two of the letters of Sri Aurobindo's describing this experience in his own life. He says, "It was my great debt to Lili that he showed me this. Sit in meditation," he said, "but do not think. Look only at your mind. You will see thoughts coming into it. Before they can enter, throw these away from your mind till your mind is capable of entire silence." I had never heard before of thoughts coming visibly into the mind from outside, but I did not think either of questioning the truth or the possibility. I simply sat down and did it. In a moment, my mind became silent as the windless air on a high mountain summit. And then I saw one thought and then another coming in a concrete way from outside. I flung them away before they could enter and take hold of the brain, and in 3 days I was free. From that moment, in principle, the mental being in me became a free intelligence, a universal mind, not limited to the narrow circle of personal thought as a laborer in a thought factory, but a receiver of knowledge from all the 100 realms of being, and free to choose what it willed in this vast sight empire and thought empire. And then one other letter that describes some of the results of this experience. This is in a letter sent to Aldous Huxley in response to a review the latter had written of the Life Divine. So in that letter, Sri Aurobindo says, "After 3 years of spiritual effort with only minor results, he's speaking of himself, Sri Aurobindo, was shown by a yogi the way to silence his mind. This he succeeded in doing entirely in 2 or 3 days by following the method shown. There was an entire silence of thought and feeling and all the ordinary movements of consciousness, except the perception and recognition of things around, without any accompanying concept or other reaction. The sense of ego disappeared, and the movements of the ordinary life, as well as speech and action, were carried on by some habitual activity of prakriti alone, which was not felt as belonging to oneself. But the perception which remained saw all things as utterly unreal. The sense of unreality was overwhelming and universal. Only some undefinable reality was perceived as true, which was beyond space and time and unconnected with any cosmic activity, but yet was met wherever one turned. This condition remained unimpaired for several months, and even when the sense of unreality disappeared, and there was a return to participation in the world consciousness, the inner peace and freedom which resulted from this realization remained permanently behind all surface movements and the essence of the realization itself was not lost. At the same time, an experience intervened. Something else than himself took up his dynamic activity and spoke and acted through him, but without any personal thought or initiative. What this was remained unknown until Sri Aurobindo came to realize the dynamic side of the Brahman, the Ishwara, and felt himself moved by that in all his sadhana and action. These realizations and others which followed upon them, such as that of the self in all, and all in the self, and all as the self, the divine in all, and all in the divine, are the heights to which Sri Aurobindo refers and to which he says we can always rise, for they presented him no longer obstinate difficulty. The only real difficulty, which took decades of spiritual effort to work out towards completeness, was to apply the spiritual knowledge utterly to the world and to the surface psychological and outer life, and to effect its transformation, both on the higher levels of nature and on the ordinary mental, vital, and physical levels, down to the subconscious and the basic inconscious, and up to the supreme truth consciousness or supermind, in which alone the dynamic transformation could be entirely integral and absolute. So he's describing, in a sense, this experience here in Savitri, Aswapati, going through this. So we can begin the fifth line from the top.
And ignorance on an uneasy throne. Travestied with a fortuitous sovereignty, a figure of knowledge garbed in dubious words and tinsel thought forms, brightly inadequate, a laborer in the dark, dazzled by half-light. What it knew was an image in a broken glass. What it saw was real, but its sight untrue. All the ideas in its vast repertory were like the mutterings of a transient cloud that spent itself in sound and left no trace. A frail house hanging in an uncertain air, the thin, ingenuous web round which it moves, put out a while on the tree of the universe, and gathered up into itself again, was only a trap to catch life's insect.
So we see that Asupati has come to a place where he senses the unreality of all thought, that it was all kind of brightly inadequate. He says, an ignorance on an uneasy throne, travestied with a fortuitous sovereignty. So, travestied means grotesquely or absurdly imitative. And fortuitous is happening by chance. So it's imitating kind of by chance or a chance sovereignty, accidental. A figure of knowledge garbed in dubious words and tinsel thought forms, brightly inadequate. Tinsel, you know, is this kind of sparkly, metallic strings that we put on Christmas trees just to make them shine. So its thought was like that. It was just kind of cheap glitter, in a sense. Garbed in dubious words, in words that are doubtful. A laborer in the dark, dazzled by half-light. And what it knew was an image in a broken glass. So it just sees kind of reflections of pieces of the reality, not the full reality, and not directly seeing them, but only seeing reflections of it. What it saw was real, but its sight untrue. All the ideas in his vast repertory, that it was its storehouse of knowledge, were like the mutterings of a transient cloud, like a thunder cloud kind of passing, not big or deep or strong, but just kind of rumbling, that spent itself in sound and left no trace. And then he compares it kind of to this spider web, a frail house hanging in uncertain air, the thin, ingenious web round which it moves, put out a while on the tree of the universe, and gathered up into itself again, was only a trap to catch life's insect food. Winged thoughts that flutter fragile in brief light, but dead once captured in fixed forms of mind. So it just captures these little winged thoughts that are passing by, and then they become dead when it fixes them, holds them. Aims puny, but looming large in man's small scale, flickers of imagination's brilliant gauze, in cobweb-wrapped beliefs, alive no more. So these passing thoughts become dead once held in the thought, in the mind. They become fixed. So we continue. Sohini, would you like to?
The magic hut The magic hut of built-up solitudes, made out of glittering dust and bright moonshine, in which it shines its image of the real, collapsed into the nescience whence it rose. Only a gleam was there of simple facts that shroud the mystery lurking in their glow, and falsehoods based on hidden realities by which they live until they fall from time. Our mind is a house haunted by the slain past, ideas soon mummified, ghosts of old truths. God's spontaneities, tied with formal strings and packed into drawers of reason's trim bureau. A grave of great lost opportunities, or an office for misuse of soul and life, and all the waste man makes of heaven's gifts, and all his squanderings of nature's store, a stage for the comedy of ignorance.
Thank you. So here Sri Aurobindo uses a few more similes to describe this unreal nature of the thought. He describes it as a magic hut of built-up certitudes made out of glittering dust and bright moonshine, in which it shrines its image of the real. And then that image collapsed into the nescience whence it rose. So it's like this unreal hut. And then only a gleam was there of symbol facts that shroud the mystery lurking in their glow, and falsehoods based on hidden realities by which they live until they fall from time. And then, as if a haunted house, our mind is a house haunted by the slain past. Ideas soon mummified, shriveled up and dried like a mummy. Ghosts of old truths. God's spontaneities tied with formal strings and packed into drawers of reason's trim bureau. So it takes God's spontaneities, wraps them up and puts them into nice, neat, orderly drawers of the reason. Yeah, he's speaking of Well, he says, and falsehoods based on hidden realities by which they live until they fall from time. So the falsehoods are based on realities that are hidden, and they are supported by those realities until they fall away from time, until they're of no more use in the progression of time, and they can fall away. These falsehoods do not last forever, but they may last for a while until their use is finished. What is their use? Yeah, they're supports because we don't know the reality. We don't have a solid, true knowledge. So they're stepping stones along the way, supports. They're based on realities, he says, but they can also be distortions, of those realities. They're not a clear image. They may even be twisted, perverted. And then when he was speaking of these spontaneities of God tied up and placed in the drawers of the bureau, he says they're a grave of great lost opportunities. These spontaneities of God could have been so powerful and useful, but tied up and stored in mind's bureau, they become lost opportunities. Or an office for misuse of soul and life, and all the waste man makes of heaven's gifts, and all his squanderings of nature's store, a stage for the comedy of ignorance. It's kind of poignant, this sense of the lost opportunities, all the things in life, those possibilities that are there, these even, descents or experiences of the divine, which then we throw away, forget, misuse. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, sometimes he speaks of, human nature as being so foolish. How we just waste our life, the possibilities God has given us, and, we just throw it away and just, enjoy our foolishness, our little things, our little pleasures, or little interests. and we leave behind these deeper possibilities of our soul. And he calls it, it's kind of like a comedy. So we continue.
The world seemed a long, ionic failure scene. All sterile grew, no base was left secure. Assailed by the edge of the convicting beam, the builder risen lost her confidence in the successful sleight and turn of thought that makes the soul the prisoner of a phrase. Its highest wisdom was a brilliant gaze, its mighty structured signs of the worlds, a passing light on beings' surfaces. There was nothing there but a schema drawn by sense, a substitute for eternal mysteries, a scroll figure of reality, a plan, and elevation by the architect word imposed upon the semblances of time. Existence's self was shadowed by a doubt, almost it seemed a lotus leaf afloat on a nude pool of cosmic nothingness.
Thank you. So in this witness silence of the mind of self, or the self of mind, he looks upon the world and it all seems an unreality, or here a failure scene. Ionic. Throughout time, all this labor, all this activity of the universe, and it just ends up in a big failure without sense or meaning. All sterile grew. No base was left secure. It's all unproductive, fruitless, all this activity of the world. And there was no firm base for all of this activity. Assailed by the edge of the convicting beam. So this is, I think, his consciousness looking upon this world as an unreality, convicting it of inadequacy. The builder reason lost her confidence. It's reason who has built up this mental image of the world. In the successful sleight and turn of thought. Sleight is a clever trick or deception. So we use our mind, the reason develops these conceptual senses of the reality of the world, but like tricks of the thought. A turn of thought that makes the soul the prisoner of a phrase. we come up with these seemingly brilliant explanations of things. This sleight and turn of thought or phrase of words to describe the indescribable, and then to put it in the bureau, packed neatly into little packages of conception. Its highest wisdom was a brilliant guess, and even its mighty structured science of the worlds, only a passing light on being surfaces. Even our science is only touching the surface of things, the physical processes that we can see and feel with our senses. It hardly can get beneath the surface to the occult processes and supports of what we see. To some extent, it gets to the subatomic particles or whatever that is supporting that seen on the surface. But still, what lies underneath and supports those subatomic particles, that energy, on what basis does that rest? There was nothing there but a schema drawn by sense, a substitute for eternal mysteries, a scrawled figure of reality. It's like a careless sketch of the reality made by mind and reason, a plan and elevation by the architect word, imposed upon the semblances of time. The appearances of time. The architect makes a elevation showing the face of a building. Existence's self was shadowed by a doubt. Even the self seemed doubtful. Almost it seemed a lotus leaf afloat on a nude pool of cosmic nothingness. Debashi?
This great spectator and creator mind was only some half-seeing delegate, a veil that hung between the soul and light, an idol, not the living body of God. Even the still spirit that looks upon its works was some pale front of the unknowable. A shadow seemed the wide and witness self, its liberation and immobile calm, a void recoil of being from time-made things, not the self-vision of eternity. Deep peace was there, but not the nameless force. A sweet and mighty mother was not there, who gathers to her bosom her children's lives, her clasp that takes the world into her arms. In the fathomless rapture of the infinite, the bliss that is creation's splendid grain, or the white passion of God ecstasy, that laughs in the blaze of the boundless heart of love.
Thank you. So even this experience of the self of mind, this witness self looking detached on all that is, that experience itself seemed inadequate, unreal in a sense. All the thought-constructed world appeared unreal, but also this experience, observing that, seemed inadequate. He says this great spectator and creator mind was only some half-seeing's delegate, a veil that hung between the soul and light, an idol, not the living body of God. There is this overwhelming sense of peace, quietude, but that's not the full living experience of God, of the divine in its dynamic aspects. Even the still spirit that looks upon its works was some pale front of the unknowable. A pale front. It was just some kind of shadow almost of the unknowable. Its liberation and immobile calm, avoid recoil of being from time-made things. It was as if that witness poise was a recoil from the world, something that pulled back from the dynamism of the creation. Deep peace was there, but not the nameless force. Our sweet and mighty mother was not there, who gathers to her bosom her children's lives, her clasp that takes the world into her arms in the fathomless rapture of the infinite, the bliss that is creation's splendid grain, or the white passion of God ecstasy. that laughs in the blaze of the boundless heart of love. So this is what Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga brings. This is the more integral realization that he aims at. Not only the silence, this immobile self looking upon all things dispassionately, the good and the evil and all that happens, not taking part in it. That's only one side, one aspect of the truth. There is this other dynamic, beautiful, delightful side of the truth, the love of the divine, who leans down towards us and lifts us up into its rapture, into its white passion of God ecstasy, that laughs in the blaze of the boundless heart of love. That's that beautiful, delightful side of the divine, Krishna, the Divine Mother. Martha?
A greater spirit than the self of mind must answer to the questioning of his soul. For here was no firm clue and no sure road. High climbing pathways ceased in the unknown. An artist's sight constructed the beyond in contrary patterns and conflicting hues. A part experience fragmented the whole. He looked above, but all was blank and still. A sapphire firmament of abstract thought escaped into a formless vacancy. He looked below, but all was dark and mute. A noise was heard between of thought and prayer, a strife, a labor without end or pause. A vain and ignorant seeking raised its voice, a rumor and a movement and a call. A forming mass, a cry innumerable, rolled ever upon the ocean surge of life, along the coast of mortal ignorance.
Thank you. So Sri Aurobindo again is saying that this experience, realization of the self of mind is not the full, integral experience. A greater spirit than the self of mind must answer to the questioning of his soul. He describes it as a partial experience. For here was no firm clue and no sure road. High climbing pathways ceased in the unknown. We saw that his journey through the subtle planes of consciousness were ascending all of these endless steps and stairways to the heights of the mind consciousness, and then abruptly ceased. Just ended in a kind of a void, a quietism. He says, an artist's sight constructed the beyond. It's as if the mind is making a construction of the absolute. It's a kind of a construction in which it uses this abstraction of negating all that is, and then what's left over, this nothingness, it calls the absolute. That's, in a sense, the self, something abstracted from all that is, from all the movement, this nothingness that remains. But that also is only an experience of the mind constructing an image of the reality. A part experience fragmented the whole. He looked above, but all was blank and still. A sapphire firmament of abstract thought escaped into a formless vacancy. He looked below, but all was dark and mute. A noise was heard between of thought and prayer, a strife, a labor without end or pause, a vain and ignorant seeking raised its voice. A rumor and a movement and a call, a foaming mass, a cry innumerable, rolled ever upon the ocean surge of life along the coasts of mortal ignorance. Between. That's all it's all between the vacancy above, the formless vacancy of the superconscious, and the inconscient below. All was dark and mute. So that's the inconscient basis, and the superconscient kind of void above, where mind loses all footing. So it abstracts, it only experiences it as a void. And in between, there's all this movement of mind and life. Yeah, it's everything. All the movement of life and mind of matter, all of that is constantly shifting, changing. Below is the dark inconscient, where there's no consciousness whatsoever, there's no movement, there's nothing. It's also kind of an emptiness. And above there's this bright emptiness that maybe watches, can see below, but itself does not move. Takes no part in that movement. And in between, just this kind of noise that doesn't seem to have any sense or goal or productivity. It just is like foaming of the sea. Okay, would you like to read?
Yeah. On its unstable and enormous breast, beings and forces, forms, ideas, like waves, jostle for figure and supremacy, and rose and sank, and rose again in time, and at the bottom of the sleepless stir, a nothingness parent of the struggling worlds, a huge creator death, a mystic void, forever sustaining the irrational cry, forever excluding the supernal world, motionless, refusing question and response, repose beneath the voices and the march, the dim, inconscience dumb, incertitude to firmaments of darkness and of light, oppose their limits to the Spirit's walk. It moved, welled, in form, self's infinity, in a world of beings and momentary events, where all must die to live and live to die, immortal by renewed mortality. It wandered in the spiral of its acts, or ran around the cycle of its thought, yet was no more than its original self, and knew no more than when it first began. To be was a prison, extinction the escape.
Thank you. So he begins here by continuing his description of this middle realm of movement, of forces, ideas, and beings, jostled for figure and supremacy, each kind of fighting with the others to survive, to become greater, more expansive in its realm of experience. So this jostling rose and sank and rose again in time, as if like weeds floating in the ocean, sinking and rising up again. And at the bottom of the sleepless stir, a nothingness, parent of the struggling worlds, a huge creator death, a mystic void. So this is the inconscient again at the base, supporting this constant flux and movement of life, of thought, forever sustaining the irrational cry, forever excluding the supernal word. So it excludes the supernal word, the word of creation, that inconscient, it excludes all that movement also. It reposed beneath the voices and the march. The dim inconscient's dumb incertitude. It's dumb, that means unspeaking, quiet, incertitude. It's not knowing, it has no knowledge, no surety, anything within it, any movement of thought. So again, he describes two firmaments of darkness, that's the inconscient below, and of light, that superconscient, that sense of void or this witness consciousness above that does not participate in the movement of life or thought, to which all of that movement seems an unreality. They oppose their limits to the Spirit's walk. So the Spirit, which is caught in between in this life of movement and thought, they impose their limits. And as a result, it seems like we move endlessly within this flux, this foaming mass on the surface of this ever-changing ocean. In a world of beings and momentary events, where all must die to live and live to die. Immortal, by renewed mortality. It's as if we go life after life, endlessly caught in this karma with no release. It wandered in the spiral of its acts, or ran around the cycles of its thought, and yet was no more than its original self, and knew no more than when it first began. It all seems fruitless. To be was a prison, extinction the escape. So the only escape was to go into the void, just to cease to be. Or so it seemed. But then he comes into a different experience. He was in this self of mind, observing all of this dispassionately. But then, as in Sri Aurobindo's experience, something enters into that silence. A new experience comes. Yeah, as we wander in these cycles of rebirth, carried along in our karma forever, life after life, with no seeming progression, as if we're tied to a post and just circling around. So life is like a prison. We're caught in this wheel of karma. And the only way out is to escape into the void, to cease to be. That was put forward as the ideal, as the spiritual way of fulfillment. But Sri Aurobindo is saying, no, that's only a partial experience of the reality, one made by the mind, in effect, an abstraction. That void is actually unreal. It's only an abstraction of all that is, of all this movement, all that is not this movement. It experiences as this void, and it enters into that. But also that's a kind of a mind-constructed place. So there are other possibilities of the consciousness. And that is what he'll experience next. I don't know, shall we read a little bit of this next canto? Suresh, would you like to read? Begin. The World Soul.
A covert answer to his seeking came. In a fair, shimmering background of mind space, a glowing mouth was seen, a luminous shaft, a reckless gait, it seemed musing on joy, a veil, retreat, and escape to mystery, away from the unsatisfied surface world. It filled into the bosom of the unknown, a well, a tunnel of the depths of God. It plunged as if a mystic grove of hope, through many layers of formless, voiceless self, to reach the lost profound of the world's heart, and from that heart there surged a wordless call, blending with some still imponderable mind, voicing some passionate unseen desire, as if a no beckoning finger of secrecy outstretched into a crystal moor of air, pointing at him from some near hidden depth, as if a message from the world's deep soul, an intimation of a lurking joy that followed out from a cup of brooding bliss. There shimmered, stealing out into the mind, a mute and quivering ecstasy of light, a passion and a delicacy of russet fire.
Thank you. Helmut? Hmm? Oh, yeah. No, come. Helmut?
Let's see whether.
As one drawn to his lost spiritual home.
As one drawn to his lost spiritual home, feels now the closeness of a waiting love, into a passage dim and tremulous that clasps him in from day and night's pursuit. He traveled led by a mysterious sound, a murmur multitudinous and lone. All sounds, it was in turn, yet still the same. A hidden call to unforeseen delight, in the summoning voice of one long known, well loved, but nameless to the unremembering mind. It led to rapture back the truant heart. The immortal cry ravished the captive ear. Then, lowering its imperious mystery, it sank to a whisper circling round the soul. It seemed the yearning of a lonely flute that roamed along the shores of memory and filled the eyes with tears of longing joy. A cricket's rash and fiery single note, it marked with shrill melody night's moonless hush, and beat upon a nerve of mystic sleep, its high insistent magical reveille. A jingling silver laugh of anklet bells traveled the roads of a solitary heart. Its dance solaced an eternal loneliness, an old, forgotten sweetness sobbing came. Or from a far harmonious distance heard the tinkling pace of a long caravan. It seemed at times, or a vast forest's hymn, the solemn reminder of a temple gong, a bee-croon honey-drunk in summer isles, ardent with ecstasy in a slumberous noon, or the far anthem of a pilgrim sea. An incense floated in the quivering air. A mystic happiness trembled in the breast, as if the invisible beloved had come, assuming the sudden loveliness of her face, and close, glad hands could seize his fugitive feet, and the world change with the beauty of a smile.
Thank you. So we'll close with that beautiful experience of the coming forth of the psychic being, of the soul, experiences that come to many sadhaks in one of these forms or another, the sound of Krishna's flute or the tinkling of anklet bells, the crooning of the bees, bringing with them this deep delight of existence from the divine. So Asopati all of a sudden experiences this and goes deeper into this experience in the depths of the heart of the psychic being. So we'll continue reading through this next time. So we can play some music.
And the movement and the call. A foaming mass, a cry innumerable, rolled ever upon the ocean surge of life. A huge creator death, a mystic void, forever sustaining the irrational cry, forever excluding the supernal world, motionless, refusing question and response, reposed beneath the voices and the march, the dim, unconscious, dumb incertitude.
Thanks to